Good afternoon. How are you? If you don't know me, my name is Coach Karen Jones Opefun. I am your iLog coach and consultant. I am a mom of three, a wife, and a woman. And I wanted to talk to you about an important subject. It's called high conflict personalities or high conflict people. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. And once I talk to you about it, I'm going to give some strategies on how to deal with high conflict people. If you're not aware of the term, once I go through my information, of course, I gotta have my notes as usual. You'll understand. I don't know how people can do it without notes. I see them and it's amazing how much information that you can just kind of pour out. Like everything that I talk about, I write, I put together, but I have so many things that I want to talk about. So I write something, then I put that aside, then I write something else, and I put that aside, then I write something else, and I put that aside. So I don't spend the time to really memorize the information, all of the information. I know it. There's just like points and maybe stories I want to capture while I'm giving the information so it can be helpful. And I like to do illustrations. So I'm hoping that maybe I won't have to look at my notes throughout the whole time. So, all right, so we're talking about high conflict people or high conflict personalities. I just make them interchangeable. So, you ever notice that people would rather stop speaking to you instead of apologizing? Now, I did that post months ago and I wrote something about it and I wanted to talk about it. So, let's talk about what that looks like. Let's say you're in an argument with a high conflict person, personality, like a friend, partner, or spouse. So, high conflict personality or high conflict person is someone that has difficulty managing their emotions, like anger, rage. They're uncompromising. They have to have it their way. They blame others. They're reactionary. So, whatever they hear, they just react instead of letting it process. They allow the external environment to control them, right? So why does this happen? So for different reasons, um, what I read, one of the things I read from learned behavior, so they could have seen this behavior from friends, family, television. For example, so if a child sees a dad abusing his mom, or even the other way around, and there are no repercussions for that behavior, then it can be normalized at home. So what does that mean? It means the child thinks it's normal behavior. And that's just something that mommies and daddies do or that families do in the home. So it's also inadvertently showing the child, got my notes again, how to resolve conflict. That's how you resolve conflict. You don't sit down and you don't have a conversation about it. You're either yelling and screaming and cussing each other out, and then you end up fighting. Or one person ends up physically abusing, emotionally abusing the other person. So high conflict people are typically bullies. And what do we know about bullies? So they zero in on people they believe to be weak so they can torment them. Now, the bullying, it's really not about bullying that person or has anything to do with the victim, rather. It really has to do with the bully himself. He wants or she wants to be able to pick on someone who they find inferior to take out their rage, their inner rage on that person, on that target. So when you're having, say, a major disagreement with a high conflict person, now we talked about minor and major disagreements briefly. Minor disagreement is one where you can have a discussion about something with different perspectives and not bring emotion into it, so it doesn't like explode into a major disagreement where emotion is all up in there. There's yelling, there's blaming, there's shaming, there's threatening, and possible abuse. So when you're in a disagreement with a high conflict person, and they have crossed boundaries, they usually cross boundaries by calling you out your name or just trying to say whatever it is they need to say in order to be able to be in control of the situation. So let's say a non-high conflict person finds their behavior out of line and lets them know that. But the high conflict person doubles down on their behavior. They're justifying it. They're invalidating what the non-high conflict person is saying, and they're justifying it. So essentially, the non-high conflict person asks the high conflict person to leave. The person continues to verbally attack them. They eventually leave. The man or the woman, the non-HCP, opens the door and tells them to leave. So you would think that you would get an apology, which goes back to, you ever notice that people would rather stop speaking to you instead of apologizing, right? But typically it doesn't come, and if it does, because they want something. You may not know it at that time, but they want something. Why? Because why they're unable to apologize, they're unable to accept being wrong. That would bring their character into question. They're not able to separate themselves from the behavior, and they feel like it's an attack on them, and that they see themselves as the victim and not the other way around. So while you just got cussed out and you had to, put the other person out, you're thinking that they're gonna call you and apologize. Well, they're not, because they think what they did was justified and they believe what they did makes them the victim of what happened in the situation. Another thing is they're uncomfortable with feeling sorry. Also, they have to maintain a high level of anger and irritation to defend their position. That is the goal, to remain in that headspace, to remain in that emotional space, to remain irritated in thinking about how you did something wrong to them. And they do it long enough for them to win, whatever the prize is, what they perceive the prize is. So you end up calling and wanting to squash stuff. Also, they don't realize that the very thing that they're upset about sounds really illogical. It's irrational, because it is. I don't care how you spin it and how you double down on it. If it's irrational, it's irrational. And typically when you're having irrational behavior during an argument, it usually turns into nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense. So if you want to keep someone like that in your life, here are some tips to deal with a high conflict person. When discussing an issue, stay calm, keep your voice even and non-accusatory. This will help create a non-confrontational or a non-threatening tone. You don't want to trigger the high conflict person. During the discussion, they may want to travel back in the past and bring up some old mess that happened. No. What you do is you keep the conversation centered on what's going on at the time. Like whatever issue that you're talking about, do not engage in that talk about what happened 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. It's not helpful and it's a trap. Say what you have to say and keep it to a minimum. Use what you're, so what happens is the high conflict person may use what you're saying and criticize or minimize what you've just conveyed to that person. So keep it to a minimum, because you don't want to get pissed off. You say a lot and then they pick and choose and start turning things around on you. And then instead of keeping a level head, keeping in the thinking, using the rational mind, you're upset. So don't go back 10, 20 years, keep it to a minimum. And also, my suggestion is to get a therapist and a coach. You cannot do this alone. This behavior is very destructive and dysfunctional. Lastly, it's not your fault. So always, always, always remember that, not your fault. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions about high conflict personalities or any relationship advice questions, you can send me an email at askilockcoachkaren@gmail.com. I hope you have a good day.